Hello everyone, I am Ben with the BTC Sessions. I'm here in Chinatown in downtown Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And today I'd like to bring to you an interview I had the pleasure of conducting with the infamous Samson Mao, formerly of BTC China. Now, a lot can happen in a week, and a lot has happened in a week since I talked with Samson, but I think a lot of the topics we talked about regarding scaling are still equally relevant regardless of the latest in the space. So, without further ado, please enjoy my interview with Samson Mao. I've got a great interview today. Today I'm sitting down and I'm talking with Samson Mao. If you are unfamiliar with Samson Mao, he is notorious on Twitter for voicing his opinion very, very strongly and calling out BS if he sees it. I'd say he's very confrontational about it, but he also doesn't let anything that he disagrees with slide if he thinks it's BS. So, Samson, welcome. Can you give us a little background about yourself, where you're from, what you do, all that good stuff?
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Ben. Thanks for the kind comments. They're nicer than other ones I've seen.
Do my best.
Let's see. So I guess most people know me from Twitter, and I tweet a lot. I try to comment on all the events of the day or crazy things that are happening. Previously, I was at BTCC. That's the exchange mining pool. It was previously BTC China. Now it's the exchange in China is BTC China. So I ran that for about 2 years as COO. I got into Bitcoin basically before I joined BTCC. So I've known Bobby for a while, and he actually sold me my first Bitcoin. But I heard about it before that in TechCrunch, and I tried to do some mining back in 2013, but it didn't work. So yeah.
Awesome. So you first kind of heard about Bitcoin, you said, just through TechCrunch, and you got interested in it. And so what back then were you using it for? How has that changed over time? And how do you see that changing in the future?
So I think I'm mostly a hodler. So I buy it as an investment.
Yep.
The use cases for buying things is not great, but wherever I can use it to purchase, I will try to use it. I did try the Fold app for a while. That was cool to buy Starbucks cards and buy coffee. And I think consumer cases like that are good. But in general, I just try to use it wherever it's accepted.
So the main reason I wanted to speak with you is because of the ongoing contention over scaling Bitcoin. I did a video on that, posted it on just a few days back, and it was we'll say controversial. Out of any videos that I posted, most of the stuff I post is just kind of how to. So for me, it was controversial, but I wanted to bring you on to show that you are indeed a real person and you have opinions, and there are reasons for those opinions. So first of all, I was going to get you to briefly outline what this whole scaling debate is about.
Wow, it's been going on for years. It's kind of hard to summarize. But you know, that's one of the main problems. We don't really know what it is about, and I think that's a point that makes it drag on and on. Because you could say there are two sides to a debate. Normally in a debate, there's two valid arguments, but it's gotten down to the point where there is, one valid argument for logic and reason, and then there are some other people that want stuff, but they don't tell you what they want. And they're not very clear about their intentions either. So it's kind of hard to explain, but the public perception of what they want is they want bigger blocks. And how they want that is in a very specific manner. What they want are bigger blocks done through a hard fork right now. And the timelines are varying from whenever at the next halving that was proposed, or, in a few months, because it's really, really urgent. I think, my side of the debate, we want to do smart scaling. I don't want to do a hard fork because it does take a lot of time. It's dangerous. There's a lot of risk to it. It's not something you do casually, like, yeah, let's go and get a coffee, let's have a hard fork. It's kind of akin to open heart surgery, where, you know, if you're going to open up the patient and do something major, you'd want to do a lot more work than just, you know, or change this one thing. So there's like a laundry list of things that we could do to clean up the code base, improvements here and there, but we haven't really talked about that at all. It's just we should hard fork now because of the capacity increase, but they're kind of ignoring the fact that we have one from SegWit that
Yeah.
could give us technically 4 MB blocks. So
So can
it's not really about throughput. It's just about, we want to do this thing, and I think that's why we have this problem.
Okay. So can you briefly explain what segregated witness does, and how it allows for more transactions? Like how does it work, and what are some of the misconceptions about it that you see currently going
Well,
on?
the easiest explanation is it segregates the witnesses in the signature. So it basically splits up the block into kind of two compartments. So there's the normal block, and then there's the witness part of the block. And what it does is it allows you to put more transactions into the witness part. And the weighting is changed, not to block size, but by weight of, you know, how expensive things are. And that's how we come across with the increase, by not actually changing the 1 MB variable. So the variable is still there, it says 1 MB, but by doing this kind of extension, we can have bigger blocks. With SegWit, everything is still hashed and put on the blockchain.
So it's just essentially it still allows for more transactions per block. It's
Yeah.
just that the number, the variable is still says one, but it is allowing
Yes.
for more transactions. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So I think part of the problem with that was when people first started talking about SegWit, they called it an effective block size increase, because maybe they're comparing it with the variable one. So the one is not changed, but it is bigger, so it's an effective increase. But that has, you know, led people down the path where they're saying, you know, it's not a real increase, and it doesn't matter as long as the throughput is there.
Yeah, so it's just the label placed on it. It's the label placed on how it's done. But you're still getting more transactions.
Yep.
And what does SegWit enable that just changing the block size doesn't? Because SegWit does more than just allow more throughput, correct?
Mhm. Well, it kind of defrags the UTXO set, so it encourages you to create fewer UTXOs, and it also enables Lightning by fixing malleability. And we've seen, you know, someone created a malleated transaction in a block, and that broke some of the block explorers. But you know, Segway paves the way for a lot more development, future developments too, like Schnorr signatures.
So what are your concerns with the way that Bitcoin Unlimited is approaching scaling? What do you see that you disagree with or that worries you? Why the concern over their approach?
Well, I don't really know what their approach is other than talking. They kind of write some code, but then they don't really test their code. And a lot of functions, I don't think they finish writing code for it, but they treat everything as complete. And they're kind of mischaracterizing their work as a viable alternative to Bitcoin Core, but it's just really not. So I guess that's the biggest problem I have with their approach, is it doesn't work. They've had major security issues 3, 4 times, and they cannot maintain a stable release.
To those people on the other side that say that Bitcoin has had its problems in the past as well, and it's just part of updating the code. What do you say to that?
Well, Bitcoin did have problems in the past, but that was a long time ago. And back then, no one knew anything about, you know, cryptocurrencies, digital currencies. But now we have a lot more experience. The dev team is really, they're in their element. They know what they're doing. You can't really compare that. And there are also altcoins too. They're more stable than BU. So you can't really say, you know, there are always bugs, because this mature state in development where people kind of know how to manage digital currencies like these.
So what has been, I'm sure many people watching already know this, but what has been your tactic as far as trying to promote SegWit and get people on the same page as you? And do you feel it's been effective, or do you feel that it pushes people further away if they don't agree with you already? What's your tactic here, and how do you feel it's working?
Well, I think it definitely will push some people away because the way I deliver it can be blunt sometimes, and it's probably not nice for them to receive it. But I think that if you don't figure it out yourself, then nothing that I do or say will bring you in. There's been a lot, I don't know if you've been following, but there's a lot of big blockers that used to want to do, a 2MB hard fork or XT that have switched sides. And it's because they do the research and they understand the fundamentals a lot more. And they realize that, that's not a really good solution because
Yeah.
blockchains don't scale. And if you don't really understand it or grok it, then it doesn't really matter. So, my strategy is just to have fun with it.
So basically your position is that if somebody is supporting Bitcoin Unlimited, then they just may not have all the information presented to them properly, or is why do you think, given your view of how Bitcoin Unlimited currently is, and that aspect, that way of scaling is, why do you think people are supporting it?
Well, it's the easiest thing to understand. So I was a big blocker too originally. There's an article in Bitcoin Magazine where I said, if core doesn't change it, we're gonna change it to 2MB.
Really, I had no idea.
Like when you first look at it, it seems so obvious. Like core are these idiots, and they just don't want to do this, and there's like a huge problem. But then you kind of do more research, and you realize that it doesn't really solve anything, and it's not a smart scaling method, and it opens the door for a lot more problems in the future. Because what Bitcoin is, it's a set of consensus rules, right? There's the block propagation, block generation times. There's the block reward. There's the cap, the 21 million cap. All these things are what make Bitcoin Bitcoin. And if you start picking away at bits and pieces of it because it's inconvenient, then pretty much you don't have anything left. So the gateway drug, so to speak, is the 2MB thing, right? Everyone can participate in the debate. Like, should it be one? Should it be two? Anyone can talk about that, right? But what if you change the block time from 10 minutes to 1 minute? That gets sketchier, or other consensus rules. So it's kind of like the easiest thing for people to grab onto. And I think, well, there's two things. So one is easy to grab onto. So when people have, picked a side, then they kind of want to stick with that side. The other part is just change management. So SegWit changes some things. It is a big change. And people don't like that. And SegWit allows for Lightning. It paves the way for Lightning, and people don't like that. So it's a different model. If you're a miner, so you're used to getting the block reward, you're used to getting fees, and it's scary thinking, well, Lightning is going to change things, and I don't know what's going to happen to me in the future.
Do you think those worries are legitimate? Do you think that, because I mean the reward gradually scales down over time, where do you think miners will get their reward from in the future if there's this cap on the number of transactions on the base layer? Where do you think, do you think that's important? How do you think that will be tackled in the future?
Yeah, well, the design of Bitcoin is that you have to get your rewards in the future from the fees. That's why the block reward goes down every 4 years. It's just part of the design. So this is why it doesn't make sense to me why they want bigger blocks, because if you increase the capacity, then you're kind of removing the pressure on having to pay fees. So logically, if you're a miner or mining pool, you'd want smaller block sizes so you can get more fees. So we've seen with the spam attacks that the fees can be jacked way up. People can abuse the system to manipulate the fees. So that's part of the thing that doesn't make sense. But overall, I think miners have to live on fees. And what Lightning will do is increase that. Like Lightning devs have said before that with Lightning, we will need a bigger block size eventually, if not other capacity increases, because there will be more demands for on-chain settlement. And also it enables use cases that we don't have right now, micropayments and quick confirmation times. We can't do that right now. If I want to buy a coffee, then I have to wait for it to be confirmed, or I'm using BitPay, and they'll take the risk. But right now there are use cases that are being priced out just because the fees don't make the fees make it not make sense to pay with Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And sooner or later, that's going to happen, no matter how big the block size is.
Yeah. What do you say to people who say that Lightning is not Bitcoin? Because I've heard that a few times from various people.
Well, then you can say Coinbase is not Bitcoin, or the blockchain info wallet is not Bitcoin, because they are transacting off chain. And I don't know, that's a really hard one to answer, but Lightning is Bitcoin. You're using Bitcoin to lock it into payment channels, and you're transacting and settling on Bitcoin.
And essentially, if you're doing a Lightning transaction, it has to be linked to real Bitcoin in the system. Like there's no way around that, is there?
Yeah, there's no way around that.
Okay. I think that might be part of the worry, that people think, well, if there's a secondary layer, how do I know that the Bitcoin's actually there? I think that might be some of the confusion, maybe.
Well, you have to lock it up, otherwise you're not going to be using the Lightning protocol. So you
Fair
can
enough.
just check the code and see how it works, or talk to developers, but I can't really prove it to you.
Yeah, fair enough. What do you think that core supporters could do to address concerns of current frustrated users, or to maybe help people that are currently on the fence and they don't know which way they lean? What do you think people can do to, like, I am assuming you want more and more people to see your way of thinking. What do you think can be done?
Well, I don't think I need people to see my way of thinking. I think people need to research and study how Bitcoin works, and then they should be able to realize it by themselves that, transactions have to cost money to pay for security of the network. And there is a lot of demand for block space, and there will always be demand for block space. So I think people that refuse to listen, they're just too entrenched because of personal reasons or pride or whatever, and they just don't want to admit they're wrong. But what we
Okay.
can do is educate them. We can tell them and try.
Okay, so this question, strange one, but if you had a time machine and you could go back to any point in history in Bitcoin, what do you think could be done to avoid where we're at right now?
That's a hard one. I think I would try two things. One is I would go back and tell the core developers not to brand themselves as Bitcoin Core, and just leave it as this amorphous organization of developers that work together. Because it's really easy to create this adversary when you have this name attached to it, right? Like BTC Sessions. I hate those guys. They're
Yeah,
assholes, right?
that guy's an asshole for sure. I got a few of those on my last video.
Yeah, so maybe that would help. But another thing is, I would say, don't let Gavin be the face of Bitcoin, because I think a lot of this problem, this scaling debate, the contention and conflict is just Gavin doing his thing. So back when he was pushing XT, he was calling people up and trying to convince them to go with him. And behind the scenes, he's doing all these things to mess with people or try to convince people to go with his route. And I think that kind of campaigning has just snowballed and led to what we have today. So if they just let him be one of the guys contributing quietly and not standing outside in front doing interviews and talking to media, I think that would have cut off the problem at the source.
So my question to you now is, if there were no current debate over the block size and Core came out tomorrow with a solution and they said that they were going to do a hard fork block size increase along with segregated witness and whatever else they needed to do, and they had tested it on the testnet thoroughly, is that something that you would support if there were no politics behind it, and say maybe if Core were not Core, it was just, again, that amorphous block of people working together? Is it something you would support if it was tested?
If they had, well, the problem is not them that needs to test it. It's the community that has to prepare. So even if they're ready and say, yeah, well, you know, it's not that much work to do that, a 2 megabyte hard fork, right? It's probably like an hour of work if you just want to do that and then tell everyone to upgrade. The question is, if you want to do a safe hard fork that kind of handles how nodes will process transactions or react when it's activated, that's a lot more work. So let's say they have that and they have all that work done and they're all ready. I don't think that people would accept it, because that means they're going to have to spend time getting ready on their side, because there still needs to be a lead time for activation, and they have to see, you know, if it breaks any of their systems. And people will be frustrated because they've done a lot of work. There's 100 some odd companies that have been doing work preparing for a SegWit. There's wallets, hardware wallets, software wallets, everybody, you know, doing all this stuff. There are people building Lightning implementations. They're going to have to wait as the community gets ready. So it's another huge delay that I don't think makes sense when we have SegWit. Right? SegWit is just being stalled because of a few people, a few egos.
Yeah, okay. So how do you see this playing out then? Do you see SegWit getting activated? Do you see Bitcoin Unlimited getting enough hashing power, or just splitting at some point? Or do you see an outcome where the majority of users are happy somehow? What do you think is gonna? Where do you think this is headed?
Well, I think there's a movement now to do a user-activated soft fork, a UASF. And if there's enough people demanding it, businesses, exchanges, wallet providers, Lightning devs, then I think there's a good chance that we will be able to activate it, because, you know, it's the users, it's the economic majority that decides what happens, right? Miner activation is used because it's convenient. And either way, it's a soft fork, so it's not as bad as, you know, hard fork gone wrong, because it's still opt-in as long as there is mining power hash rate behind it at the time of activation. Then the network should proceed as normal.
And so, what happens to the miners that are still mining the non-segregated witness that don't want to go along with that? What happens in the event of a user-activated soft fork?
Well, that's fine. They just put a node in front, and then they just don't mine SegWit blocks, and that's okay too. The nature of Bitcoin is it is opt-in, so they don't have to mine SegWit blocks. They can still mine normal blocks if they really want to.
Okay, so basically they would just opt out of mining any block that has SegWit, and they would, other than less chance of them being able to mine because they've decided not to mine these particular blocks, they'd still be able to mine just fine. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. At least that's my understanding. But yeah, the only problem is if they attack, then that's a different ballgame. But then Bitcoin was never meant to have, you know, a large group of miners trying to attack it. It's supposed to be that the incentives align them with the users.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop with the block size debate stuff here. I want to end on a little bit of a lighter note, because I think it's important that people realize that even if you are on the other side of the debate, a lot of the fundamentals of why people got into Bitcoin are still quite similar, and we're still coming from a similar place. So what I want to ask you last is what does Bitcoin mean to you, and how is it important in the grand scheme of things, and what do you hope Bitcoin becomes? I know that's a few things, but
Okay, so I think the most important thing for me about Bitcoin is it gives power back to the people. It is an equalizer. So people have power over their own finances again, over their own assets again. And it changes a lot of things because now money is information. So there's a lot more things that you can do that you could not do before, and you don't have to trust people anymore. You can actually, be your own bank. And there are a lot more use cases that we still don't know about yet. IoT could be powered by Bitcoin or some digital currency, but it's just a new paradigm that changes the world. I think that's what we need to protect. Because we hear a lot of people talk about decentralization a lot, but that's not the goal in and of itself. I think the goal is that we keep it decentralized so we can still maintain that sovereignty.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to end there. Samson, thank you so much for sitting down with me. I'm glad that I got a chance to chat with you. I will say, compared to on Twitter, you're not as adversarial as as people may believe. You do speak reasonably, I'd like to think, and hopefully a few people watching this will realize that you're not evil if they're coming from the Bitcoin Unlimited side of things. But again, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe, drop a tip if you're able to, and share this video. I'll see you next time on the BTC Sessions.